Hey there, thank you for joining me for the final video for Scraps or Bust. So last week I shared my monogram bag idea that I made out of the mess kit and spent some time this week working on the embroidery, and here's the final product. For the most part, when I did the stitching on the letter, I used the same thread and technique that I did like on the line of the letter on the seam into the background. So yay, I have a new little scrappy bag, which I love because I put little projects in them and then keep them in my enormous bag that I call the abyss, and I lose everything in. So it's always good to have little separate bags to put all your stuff in. So the leftover bits from this is what I'm going to use to create this little mosaic piece. And that's kind of how I like to work lately, is do a project and then immediately take those scraps, do another project and another project until virtually the scraps are gone, which I think is such a cool way to create. So I'm thinking about options. Obviously, there's so many options of how to do mosaic and how to work with mosaic. And lots of ideas are popping into my head. You could, for a source of a line drawing, you could go into any coloring book and just draw, on tracing paper, trace some elements that you want to do, some mosaic in, like this turtle, I think would be perfect to pop little pieces of fabric in. What a great way to color him in. This is a design that I created when I go and teach my Quilt As Inspired method. These are the center mandalas, and for ideas on that I go into detail in my book Quilt As Inspired, where you could actually create your own center design, and it's also now available on the Kindle store, so that's great. For an instant gratification read on how to create these center pieces, you could just download that book and the instructions are right there. Now, originally these designs, what I was saying is trace them out with a Frixion pen, free motion quilt it, and then fill it in with paint or applique. And that was really fun. But I thought, it would be really neat to see the same design in something totally different. I came across this Gouda, which is a water-based resist that is normally used for painting on silks. You would trace your design on Gouda, with Gouda on your fabric, and then that acts as a resist so that the paint won't spread. And I was thinking, I wonder if this would work on cotton with the Sukaniko inks. This Gouda you can find in an art supply shop like Myhre or Guyry's, and then of course on Amazon. They sell it on Amazon. What I did was I taped my design onto my work surface. This is a 12-inch design, and then I put a piece of a white prepared for dyeing cotton and then taped that on top of the drawing, and I could easily see through it to use the Gouda as a pen. And here's a little video snippet of what that looks like, how you would draw that out with Gouda. Here's a little snip of fabric just to show you don't have to just use white, and if it's a darker fabric, just use a light box or a clear table. Input your, I turn my flashlight on my iPhone so I can see the images really, really well. But I'm basically just using this, like, you remember the old puff paint and t-shirt craft? It feels like that. You just careful obviously to not have your hand on the fabric to smear your design, and just begin to draw with this. And you can see it gets clumpy in some places. If you squeeze too hard, you want to get your consistency just right. Just pick up some of that paint you can see that I'm doing here, and then continue on. And it's okay if it gets, it's supposed to look sort of inconsistent. Mosaic is inconsistent. So it's okay if it's lumpy in some places. It's just part of the effect, and so don't stress. This will dry within 30 minutes, and what I did is I turned it upside down on my work surface after it was completely dried to heat set it. And I took another sample that I did earlier, tried to wash out the gold in it, and it stayed perfectly in place. So after about 30 minutes, heat set it and you are good to go. And this water-based Gouda comes, I think it's like gold, silver, copper, and black. And then I think it comes in clear too. Okay, and then here it is again, the entire design drawn out with the Gouda. And I personally love to work on a quilted surface. I just love that tactile, puffy feeling. I feel like if I'm going to fuse a bunch of little bits down, it's going to stick better when I've got batting under there and all of the fibers can sort of meld together. So I made it a quilt sandwich, just used a piece of batting. Doesn't matter what kind of batting, whatever you got, and a backing. And the first thing I thought was, gosh, it would be really pretty to stitch some of these really tiny lines with just matching thread, matching to the background. So I chose 2 strands of DMC embroidery floss in white and stitched along some of those lines. And I just did a running stitch, right? I didn't tie a knot or anything in the thread. I just ran the thread under the background and stitched over it. So 2 inches from where you're going to start, just run your insert your needle in and then come up to the place where you're going to start and then just begin doing the running stitch. I typically try to stay 1/8 of an inch away, so on the back I don't get as big of a stitch. Normally I just wait until I can feel that needle on my finger in the background and then just dig up the fabric, and usually that's about 1/8 of an inch away. I'm not trying to go for a hand quilting record here. I'm just quilting the pieces together because this mosaic technique is putsy, and so I'm certainly not going to cut teeny tiny little pieces to fill in these lines. So as you can see, I'm going in 2 inches away and then just pulling it so that that thread disappears, and then I'm going to start the stitching up all of these skinny little lines. So just keep stitching up those lines, and then when you get to the top, you can travel in through the batting and then come out your next entry point, which saves all that cutting and weaving in. Now it's time to fuse your fabrics, and all I did here was I did use Wonder Under, paper side down, fuse side up, and then began to just put the fabric shapes on top of it. And then, really important, make sure you put a Teflon sheet over this, and then run your iron over that Teflon sheet, flip the whole thing over, and then just run a quick iron on the paper side of the fusible. Let that cool, and then peel the paper off. And some of the residue may end up on your Teflon sheet, but the great thing about a Teflon sheet is it just rolls off. So once it's cool, you can just roll that stuff right off. And then keep fusing your scraps of fabric so that you can cut your shapes from it, and everything is fused and the edges won't fray, and it's really, really fun and freeing to work in this way. So here I've got my fabrics, my fused fabrics all in a pile, some matching Sukaniko inks, and of course I'm dying to see if these inks work with this gold Gouda to see if it's going to run, because these tend to run a little bit if you're not really careful with these inks. And so here is a little snippet of what that looks like. So I'm using these inks straight out of the bottle, and the great thing about these are they're very intense. One coat will do it. They just cover the fabric really beautifully without changing the hand of the fabric. For a more comprehensive video on how to use these inks and how to shade with them, I do have a video on my YouTube channel. I think it's just called Sukaniko Ink, so you can review that, and I go into way more detail about how to use these inks with aloe. But for this design, I'm actually, as I'm coloring this, I'm thinking, oh, how cool would it be to color some of the other skinny lines and then run the white thread on top of those once this dries. And this only takes like 30 to 60 minutes to dry, so not a big waiting time, which is great. Instant gratification is always really fun. So I colored in, I just used 3-4 colors of this ink, colored in some spaces, and then this is what it looks like. And that's not to say that I'm not going to color more spaces in later. I'm just sort of easing it in because I'm not really sure. I want to get some of these mosaic pieces on before I commit to coloring too many places. I can always go back and color, and I don't really have a plan yet. I'm just sort of working a little bit, and as ideas come, I just sort of go for it. And it's really great to create this way. It's not a huge project, and it's just playtime. And now it's time to cut these mosaic pieces. I'm going to show you 2 different ways. The first way is just an idea for you. I think this would be a really cool method for filling in the large, pretty geometric shapes of the turtle. Now, if your fabric's already fused, you can do this just with a tracing paper template and trace out an area of the design, and then cut it out, and then use that on your fused fabric, cut that shape out. And then here's a little video of a method of mosaic that you could do if you were filling in geometric shapes, say for the turtle. I'm going to do something a little bit different, but I'm just going to show you an idea. So I've got my cutout shape. This is a fused piece of fabric. I'm cutting around it so that it will fit inside the shape, but I still want to see my gold lines plus some white space in between the fabric and the gold line, in true mosaic form. So, and these little fused shavings that I'm cutting off are really cool. I'm like, oh, I could do something awesome with those. So of course I'm going to save those. So here I'm just clipping this shape into strips, and then each strip I'm just going to shave off a little bit more. So you can see the white spaces in between the mosaic pieces. I think you kind of get the idea. Just lay them out like so. Take your next piece, right? Clip it so make sure that it fits, and then ultimately you'll have a piece that resembles the shape you're doing, all separated by the white spaces, which makes it look very mosaic. And as I said, this piece that I'm doing is much too organic for that organized way of doing mosaic. So I am going to just cut a bunch of tiny little pieces as shown in the next video and use those to fill in like a jigsaw puzzle. So I'm going to choose a few colors and just make some completely random little clips. It really helps to have small serrated scissors here. I've got a piece of batting. You could use that. You could use a piece of felt, just something to keep these pieces on so they don't slip all over. These are fused pieces, remember, so that's why we can just cut shapes without worrying about fraying. And I'm going to keep some of the bigger pieces just in case I want to use some bigger shapes. I'm going to want to use some in the binding. I think I'm just going to do a fused binding and just make this the quickest project ever. Maybe use it as a trivet or something to keep my items from sliding around as I travel, because that is always an issue when you pull a trailer. Stuff shifts everywhere, so it's always good to have something padded and soft to keep your things from banging around and sliding into each other. You should have a little pile that looks like this, as well as bigger fabric scraps above it, and we'll just kind of start playing around. So this requires a little bit of patience. I'm just using these shapes, trying to fit them in. Definitely get yourself some tweezers, because this method, it's so small that it's really hard to use your fingers, your hands. You'd be very frustrated if you don't have tweezers. Tweezers are great. And just start kind of playing, laying out pieces. I probably have maybe 1/16 of an inch in between each of the shapes. And then don't be afraid, if your piece is almost right, it's gonna fit, but maybe there's a extra point or whatever, just pick up the piece and clip it off. You're not committed to the shapes that you've already cut, in other words. Just a lot of playing around with the shapes and getting them to sort of fit. And if you're a person that enjoys doing jigsaw puzzles, you'll love this method. If you don't love doing jigsaw puzzles, this may not be your favorite way to play. You may want to go back to the geometric shape, where you just take a shape, cut it into pieces, and lay them out just as they were. Once I get like 3 or 4 shapes that I really like, the way that they're sitting, and I know I can build from there, I probably say every 3 or 4 shapes, I just commit. I just put them down, pop the iron on them, get them in place, and that way when I put more pieces on, I'm not shifting around the work that I've already done. Heat set them, takes just like 2 seconds with the iron, and then those pieces won't move. And eventually your shapes will all be covered with little pieces of fused fabric to resemble a mosaic piece. So then, after I got that color done, I played with the butterfly shape. So if you look at the purple wings of the butterfly, I did sort of a gradual color gradation, where I used a dark purple, and this is all from the same fabric. I just used the dark purple, then I went into sort of the print, and then into the hot pink. Played with some more light blue fabric. This is more filled in. I've got the oranges and the reds. Did a little bit more painting. And then ultimately this is the finished piece. And again, I think what I'm going to do is just take the leftover fused fabrics, press them around the outside, fold them to the back, and then I've got this simple little trivet that I can use in the Airstream. And of course, I'm going to say save those bits, because now you've got fused bits that you can make more mosaic pieces with and collage work. And just make sure you save the fused bits separate from your non-fused bits, because those are two totally different things to play with. So this completes the Scraps or Bust series. I want to thank you for allowing me to share a few ideas for using up bits and pieces of fabrics and threads and beads. Please make sure you're subscribed to the Quilt As Inspired channel and leave a comment on this, any of the Scraps or Bust videos for your chance to win one of 3 mess kits to play with. On Sunday, December 29th at noon, Mountain Time, I will go live and choose 3 names. If you're a lucky winner, I'll contact you to get your address so I can send one on. If you'd like to see the kits that are available for purchase, please visit my Etsy shop at Myhre Designs. I hope your year-end celebrations are filled with creative magic and joy. Coming up in the new year, I'll be taking a 2-month journey out west, which will start at Craft Napa. I'll be releasing videos of my travels, my inspiration, and project ideas, so please stay tuned. I'd love to share my adventure with you. The series will be called Annie Get Your Fun, and it will start in mid-January. Happy holidays, and we will see you next Sunday for the Mess Kit prize drawing. And remember, save those scraps.